Hi everyone, so today I'm gonna share with you some of the series that I've had on my shelves for ages that I'm just not going to finish. I believe this is actually probably going to be a two-part video because I simply had way too many. As you guys know, I've been reading for most of my life and I was super surprised when I went through my shelves and figured out how many series I have no intention of finishing off. So of course, I'll do the disclaimer, if you love these series, you're welcome to encourage me to finish them, but I probably won't. Pretty much all of these I have completely lost interest in. That's not to say they were necessarily a bad book, but a lot of the times I just gave up. Alright, so let's just get into it. First up, I have a really popular book that has awesome reviews, and that is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherynne and Valente. I did enjoy this book when I read it. I think I gave it 3 stars maybe, quite a while ago. But I just have no real interest in carrying on with the story. I think there might even be like 5 or 6 books at this point, and although I enjoyed this one, I'm just not invested enough to keep going. Next, I have Love in the Time of Global Warming by Francesca Block. I read this several years ago. I believe it's a duology, and didn't love this one. Don't care about reading the next book. It has a really pretty cover though, and this one is a retelling of the Odyssey, which is kind of cool, but again, not gonna finish. Next, I have kind of a classic YA fantasy, and that is Finnikin of the Rock by Melina Marchetta. Again, I really liked this one, but this is actually a companion series, and this is one that people have told me I should continue on with, but it's been years since I've read this one now, and I just don't see myself picking up the rest. Now I'm going to show you a couple adult series. This first one is The Rosie Project by Graeme Simsion. This is like a chick lit kind of book, I think. I read it, again, years ago. Most of these I read quite a long time ago. And there is a follow-up book that I used to own, but I have unhauled, and this is fine as a standalone for me. Next, I have the Earth's Children series by Auel. I read the first 3 books, I believe, in this series, and I did enjoy them, but they're really long, very dense, and I just have no interest anymore. I enjoyed those first 3, but I think there might be like 6 or 7 now, and just not gonna do it. Next up was one I actually had no idea was a series, which is why I've only read the first one, and that is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by Frank Baum. I read this when I was a teenager, liked it, didn't know it was a series, only learned that when I was an adult, and I'm fine with this one book. Next up I have, I think is the only new adult title on this list, and that is Easy by Tammara. I liked this book, and it has a follow-up that's told from the male perspective, but it's the exact same story, but it's just from his point of view, so I just felt it was really unnecessary and I'm not gonna read it. Next, I have Vengeance Road by Erin Bowman. I really liked this book, but again, it's a companion series. I have a hard time reading companion series, and I don't think I'll be picking up Retribution Rails, although I could be convinced otherwise at some point, I'm sure. Next, I have Not a Drop to Drink by Mindy McGinnis. This is another book that I really enjoyed, and it has a follow-up, but I just for some reason have no interest in reading the follow-up, even though the ending of this book like breaks you. But again, a book I love, has a follow-up that has good reviews as well, but for some reason I'm just not interested. Next, I have The Haunting of Sunshine Girl by Paige, McKenzie. I read this for our first spookathon that we did, and it did scare me, but I'm like easily scared. So, but I know there are more in this series, but I didn't like it enough to warrant kind of sticking with these characters. So it was scary, it was fun to read during October, but that's all. Next, I have The Interview with the Vampire series by Anne Rice. Now, I read this book after the Queen of the Damned movie came out, like in 2000, I think 2000 it came out. So I was quite young when I read this, probably too young to be reading The Vampire Diaries. Not Vampire Diaries, Interview with the Vampire. And since it's been so long since I've read these books, I'm just not gonna finish. I just don't care anymore. Next, I have The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. This is another one I read as a teenager, and I think I read the first 3 or 4 books. And I enjoyed them. They're really fun dragon stories, but at this point, I think the last book came out after I had graduated from high school, and it just wasn't on my radar anymore, and at this point it's been so long that I'm just not going to finish. Next, I have a middle grade title, and that is Wildwood by Colin Melloy. I read this last year, and I quite enjoyed it. It's set in Portland, it has some really cool illustrations, it was a really fun story, but I just don't care to continue on. This like wrapped itself up quite nicely. And although I enjoyed it, I don't feel the need to be back in this world anymore, so I'm just gonna keep it at the 1. Next up is my favorite book ever, The Death and Life of Zebulon Finch. Kidding. I hate this book. It has a follow-up. I'm not gonna read it. End of story. Next up I have Ancillary Justice by Leckie. This is a very intense sci-fi book and I did enjoy it, but I will be honest, I think I need to give it a reread if I was going to continue on with the series, and I just don't see myself doing that, so it's gonna stay to the one book. Next I have Carrier of the Mark by Leigh Fallon. I remember very little about this book except that I didn't like it, and it was like almost word for word Twilight at times, and I just found it quite ridiculous. Like, there were definitely moments in this and I'm like, how did this get published? It is Twilight set in Ireland. So needless to say, I won't be picking up the rest of the series. Next I have This Dark Endeavor by Kenneth Auel. This is a Frankenstein retelling, and again, I read this during the first spookathon that we participated in, and I very much didn't like it as much as I wanted to. It's a duology, and because I didn't love the first one, I'm not going to read the second one. Then I have The Murder Complex by Lindsay Cummings. This is a dystopian novel that just really didn't do anything new in my mind. It was fun enough to read, but is only a duology, and because, again, didn't love the first one, I'm not going to read the second one. Next up I have a contemporary story, and that is 99 Days by Katie Catugno. The storyline in this book very heavily features cheating, and I really don't like that in books, so I didn't enjoy this book. They just released the follow-up, and needless to say, not gonna read it. Next I have The Match Trilogy by Ali Condi. Again, another kind of like cliche dystopian series that came out when that craze was going on. Read the first two, didn't love them, didn't hate them, and I'm not gonna read the third one. Then I have Defiance by CJ Redwine. I can describe this book as unmemorable. It is a fantasy novel that I didn't know anything about when I picked it up, and that was years ago now, and I really don't remember very many of the details. There are other books in this series. I think there might be 2 more, maybe only 1 more, but this one didn't leave anything behind in my mind, so this is the only one I'm gonna read. Next I have The Blackthorn Key by Kevin Sands. This is another middle grade novel. Again, another book that I did enjoy, but not enough to feel compelled to read the next book in the series. I would recommend this middle grade book. It's all about like alchemy and solving puzzles, which is really fun, but didn't get invested in the characters, so I'm not gonna continue on. Next I have A Catawitch by Nnedi Okorafor. This was a book I really wanted to love, and I did like it, but I only ended up giving it 3 stars. It took me quite a long time to read, even though I think it's considered a middle grade novel. I do recommend it to people. It has really cool mythology in it, but I'm not going to read the second book. Next I have Vivian Apple at the End of the World by Katie Coyle. This is a book all about the rapture, where like many people in the world have just been like taken to heaven, or so they think. It was mediocre. It was okay. And it's kind of like a road trip book, which is fun and something I like, but there's more books in this series and I'm not gonna read them. Next I have How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell. Again, I read this during the first ever spookathon, our first ever spookathon, and it was really fun and super silly, and I very much enjoyed it. It's not like the movie at all. It's completely different. But it's a really, really long, silly middle grade series that I just don't feel like I need to read. I don't think I'll get too much from it, but it is super fun and I totally understand why kids love it. Next I have Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I actually don't know if I knew this was a series when I read this book, but I believe there's 4 books in this series. I read the first one. I enjoyed it. It was a good sci-fi story. I see why it's kind of a classic, but I really just don't feel any need to continue on. Next I have Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. This is another long middle grade series. I've read the first 3 books, not in love with them. You sense a theme here, so I'm not gonna finish. But again, I think this is being turned into a movie pretty soon, and so I think I understand why people are excited about it, but not my cup of tea. Next I have The Arcana Chronicles by Cressley Cole. I've only read this first book. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic bad boy with motorcycles, end of the world, not really my thing, didn't like it. I think I gave it 2 stars, maybe even 1 star, so needless to say, not gonna read the rest. So next up I have the Pendragon series by DJ McHale. This is another series that I read when I was quite a lot younger and really, really enjoyed when I was reading it then. But now it's been so long and I just feel like I probably won't love it as much as I used to, and I just want to let sleeping dogs lie. Second to last, I have Walk on Earth a Stranger by Ray Carson. This was a book that I actually enjoyed when I read it. It's kind of a gold rush novel, but there's like magical elements to it, and I really enjoyed her approach to storytelling. But I read it kind of quite soon after it came out, and in between this one coming out and the next one coming out, I just lost interest in the story, and I probably won't continue on, which is really sad because these covers are beautiful. So the last one is one I'm actually super sad about because it is A Book of Spirits and Thieves by Morgan Rhodes. This is like a companion series to Fallen Kingdoms, and I really liked this first book, and I own the second book, but I haven't read it yet. But I just found out that they have kind of cancelled the trilogy, and the third book's never going to be released. So it really has, like, I think there's a cliffhanger at the end of the second book, and if I know that that third book's not going to ever come out, I'm just not going to read it, I think. So I'm just going to, like, I enjoyed my time reading this one, and I think I'm just gonna leave it here if I know I'm never gonna get the third book. Alright, so that was only about half of the series I have on my shelves that I don't intend to finish. If you think there are any series in here that I really need to get to, let me know in the comments. I could be persuaded. But yeah, so we'll be back with another video like this soon to show you the rest of them. But for now, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Happy reading, and thanks for being awesome. Bye!